All right, what is going on, everybody? It's your boy K-Dub, and tonight we got a special discussion. Got two friends here with me. I'll let them introduce them in a second, but I just want to let you guys know how this conversation even came about. My brother Rob does some business and got introduced to a friend who does similar selling products. And hey, come to find out, brother was an atheist. And it's like, okay, let's chop it up. Rob hit me up, and he was like, all right, let's have a discussion on your channel. I was, I do a lot of interactions and discussions, and hey, that's what I love to do. Talk about worldviews, talk about truth, morality, meaning, beauty. Those are important things in life to discuss and come to answers on. And so here we are to discuss those things. So without further ado, I want to let my boy Rob introduce himself. There you go, Rob.
Hey, what's going on, man? Thank you so much for putting this together. Normally, I'm watching you on there, and normally we do this in public. I've done a couple of these online before, but I really wanted to start doing it again. So I'm like, K-Dub, he's got this channel set up already. We've talked about doing this already in the past, and I was like, yeah, this just makes sense. My name's Rob. Most of you guys, if you're watching, you probably know me. I'm a deacon at Heritage Grace Community Church, and part of what I do for a living is I am engaged in affiliate marketing, internet marketing, where I build a brand of myself online and interact with a lot of people, especially on social media. I have two Facebook accounts, and the one that I utilize for business, every once in a while, I'll engage in conversation of a religious nature because either I will share something of mine and people comment on it, or other people share things of theirs. And this entire conversation stemmed out of a question that was asked by who is going to introduce himself next, about what system of government works best for a society. And I said, of course, a Christian one, a theistic one. And he would hold to maybe a secular humanist position. And of course, if I'm incorrect in that, he will correct me. But I thought it was just a cordial conversation that I've had. I haven't had much of these in the past. He was very intelligent, able to really communicate his position quite well. He engaged in what I would say is logical thought, which for somebody who engages in street ministry, we don't run into that very often. Now, obviously, I, as a Christian, would say that there are some holes in his logic, and I'm sure he would say the same for me. But all in all, the conversation, although it was very heated topic, and certainly very emotional things can arise out of it, he seemed to be a lot different than the ones I typically engage on an everyday or every week basis when we go out doing street ministry. I really was taken by how well he composed himself, how just calm and collected he was. And I was like, this guy, he's actually a genuinely nice dude that I would have no problems with outside of these conversations actually becoming friendly with. And I thought it was a cool opportunity, and he accepted. So I just look forward to have a good conversation this night. Things may get heated at some points when we're discussing things. It's very informal. And I'm just excited to be here with you guys, and I hope that we each can walk away with something from this conversation. And ultimately, my goal is not to win an argument. My goal is to win a person for the Lord Jesus Christ, who is my King, your King, everyone's King. I am a Christian, and above all else, that is the first and foremost thing on my mind, wishing that other people would become Christian.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Amen. Yeah, so I can echo everything you said, just with 5-10 minutes talking to I don't want to say his name just in case he wants to give a different name or not. I'll let him decide if he wants to do that. But just with talking to him 5-10 minutes in the background, back chat, and seems like a nice guy, and so I can echo that. And without further ado, though, I will let him introduce himself to the audience, and then we'll get going with some meaty discussion.
Hey guys, so my name's Dwayne Burns. I'm originally from the Bay Area. Myself, solar panels currently. I have a pretty much a referral-based business. I've mastered some of the crafts of internet marketing, and I'm looking forward to furthering my education and building a business in that way. I always think it's great when I feel like the driving force of humanity as a whole is really just the discussion of ideas. There's no real other way for any society to progress. So, I actually don't. I never have a true agenda when I'm having discussions, but merely just to have the discussion because more so than anything is, I think that most people have more in common than what they don't have in common. And finding those points is really what creates a positive community that everyone feels safe to live in. So, me, I don't really actually tie my emotions to beliefs. I don't know from what people tell me. People have told me that that's not really normal. I've even been told that I am very emotionally disconnected a lot of the time. So, that's just that's just the truth about me. I don't know what it is, but so the discussion probably won't get too heated. I doubt it will. But yeah, man, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun for sure. And I'm just really hoping that we actually can have a more of a platform where more of this comes about. Not even just this discussion, but that more people are inspired to create videos and put out content so that people talk, because talking is good for society. So let's get it cracking.
Awesome.
Yeah, man, definitely agree with all that, man. I'm like I said, blessed to, like you said, have two people from different worldviews even come together and discussing these things rather than being on the internet just yelling at each other. I always prefer this. I'll tell people, if we disagree about something, we can talk about it. That's what adults should do, right? So I do have a question for you. This isn't necessarily about your worldview, but maybe your background. So did you grow up in the church, or like what was your maybe religious experience or anything like that you can tell?
Yeah, actually, I did grow up in the church. My granddad was a pastor. He owned a church, and he had 11 kids, and 8 of them are in various phases of ministry. 2 of them are pastors. 3 of them are pastors. One is a youth pastor, and the other ones they're all everyday churchgoers. Bible study on Thursday, prayer on Tuesday. So, very,
Right.
very embedded into the culture, more so. Even as an African American, it's really embedded to the culture. And almost to the point where you actually don't meet too many minority atheists.
Right.
So yeah, my dad is actually a minister, and my mom. So yeah, pretty much all of my family are all believers, actually.
Okay. So how did you come to atheism? Like, what was that like for you?
Well, actually, I growing up, I had very serious questions. I think that me and my dad would have disagreements about things, and I just didn't feel like he was really an open-minded person. So I started to try to really understand what was driving his viewpoint. And when I went to college, my best friend is actually he just graduated with a degree in theology. He's actually getting married this September. He's my closest friend, actually. So when we were in college, he was he told me he was going to major in theology, and I ended up taking all the religious studies classes with him because we played basketball together. So, you know, I picked up the world studies classes because it fit, you know, our little basketball schedule, and you know how it plays out with teams. You know, they get on the same classes and shit. So yeah, and yeah, so I'm very, very familiar with the culture in that from that point of view. My experiences with it, though, I was a believer until I was 17, and then that's when I wasn't a believer anymore. As far as experiences go, interestingly enough, I was actually a minister when I was young. Public speaking is one of my skills. So there's a lot of video actually of me actually speaking at a lot of churches when I was younger, between like the ages of I'd say 11 and 16. The last time was when I was around 16.
Could I actually ask a question?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Because I'm picking up on a couple of things, and I want to kind of see where you're at in terms of what you feel like what your proficiency level of the Bible is, because there's a couple of things that I, as a believer, would throw up as red flags. Okay, because you're using terms like "I used to be a believer," or I was a minister. When now, obviously, many people have different interpretations of the Bible. Obviously, I think mine is correct. I would hold to a Reformed understanding of the Bible, which would be that I'm Calvinistic, and along with some other doctrines that come up with theology and what it means to understand the scriptures. And the question I have is, are you familiar with the scriptures that say that if they left us, they were never really among us?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I just want to make it like kind of plain that I would affirm that scripture, meaning that since you left the faith, you were never really a true believer to begin with. So anytime you hear us dialogue in that sense, I would do so because first and foremost, I'm a Christian, and B, my foundation is the scriptures. And right. I would say that was, you never really attained faith to begin with. And I think ultimately that would be one of the major issues that we would obviously come into conflict with, as well as why some of the issues would arise.
Could you go back to that? You said I never would have attained faith. Can you explain a little bit more about what it means to attain faith, and can you define what faith is?
So true saving faith is one that is
true saving faith, or is it just faith? Because well, it's going to be very, very distinctive words.
So I'm defining it in this context, but because true faith is saving faith. So it's, yes, I'm being a little redundant in that even.
So just to be clear, is saving faith and faith the same thing? And how do you go about measuring how much faith you have, and how can someone else quantifiably measure how much faith you have?
Biblically, yes, they're the same thing.
Okay. So and saving faith, it's all the same?
Correct.
Okay. So what is faith?
So faith is defined in Hebrews 11:1 as the assurance of things not seen. So faith has an object, and I would say that object is Christ. And so
faith has an object. So when you say faith has an object, do you mean that faith possesses the object? Like it is in the faith, whatever it is, has the capabilities to be in possession of a thing.
So no, what I'm saying is that faith, if at its basic level, is trusting.
Okay.
And so so faith in the Greek word pistis, trusting, and I would say, biblically speaking, that is supposed to be in Christ. The object of that is to trust Christ, believe on him.
Yeah, it's not faith in faith. It's faith in a person, right. That person being Jesus Christ. I'm not simply saying when I believe in the God of the Bible, I'm not simply saying this nebulous faith that, oh, I just believe in my heart of hearts that's going to be the case. No, it is a dogmatic assurance that I cannot be wrong about.
And let me answer your other question.
No, I have to pause there.
Okay.
I have to pause there. When there's a very important statement that he made, that he says that you said it was a dogmatic, what was the word you used after that? And you said something
a dogmatic assurance that I cannot be wrong about.
So a dogmatic assurance that you cannot be wrong about. How did you determine that you could not be wrong about it? What method did you use?
God. In simple form, God, because I believe in the supernatural, right? God says that he is the one who gives faith as a gift. He is the one who gives repentance as a gift. He is the one that gives you the ability to believe in him. And if God, the way I define it, the way I believe the Bible defines it, is that he's all-knowing, all-powerful, and ever-present. With that definition, he can certainly do that according to his character and his will. And what I'm asserting is that he has given me such a faith that it cannot be shaken, because it is true without a shadow of a doubt, period. Because he is all-knowing, all-powerful, he has implanted in me a surety that is beyond all measure.
So the issue I have with that argument is the method by which we find things to be true has to be falsifiable. Do you know what falsifiable is?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. The ability to take a particular argument and argue to the contrary.
No. So falsifiable is, or refutability of a statement is the inherent possibility that it can be proven false. So for example,
that's what I said.
But for example, a falsifiable statement. Let me just get a couple right here. So a falsifiable claim is one for which there is some observation we could make that would show us that the claim is false.
Okay.
So
what? And the problem with my statement is that you can't determine it to be false.
Yeah. So for instance, if I say that this tree is 6 feet away from this house, right?
Yeah.
We can go outside and measure if the tree is actually 6 feet away from the house. That's a falsifiable statement.
But you end up in a regress, in my opinion, at that point, because ultimately you're subjecting whether or not the accuracy of the measurement tool is working. You're also determining and just assuming that the labeling of the actual measurements are correct, and then you're just trusting in that. At the end of the day,
not really.
I think you're stuck in a position where you're just making a bunch of assumptions that cannot be, and I will defend my claim as to why mine isn't merely an assumption.
Well, you actually said it was.
No.
Because you said it's true because it's true.
No. I'm saying it's true because God says so.
But I'm saying, how do we demonstrate what God says? How do we know that? Like, how do we come to using a method to determine whether or not God says a certain thing? Because what we have to separate is, if we only say that because it is written in a book, that is enough information to determine whether or not the content of it is true, then that argument wouldn't be strong enough to suggest that other similar customs are not true by very similar standards.
No, well, actually, that's actually fallacious, because to say if God wrote something in a book, therefore other gods or like Islam or something wrote it in a book, therefore we have to accept that as well.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Because it seems like what you're saying is if we accept one God, then we got to accept them all.
No, what I'm saying is
the claim
the standard of evidence for which other people claim there is a God is the same as what you are claiming.
Sure. And I'd actually like to demonstrate from my worldview that position is erroneous. Okay, because again, I'm a Christian, so I answer like a Christian. Isaiah chapter 45 says there is no other gods beside him. Period.
How do you know that's true?
Because God is the only one to exist.
God is not a liar.
How do you know that God said that in the Bible, though? Like, how did you go about discovering that?
By revelation.
So are you saying that God telepathically told you specifically, or are you saying that
no,
and that's in the Bible? Because is how are we establishing that the God that you're speaking of influenced or wrote the Bible?
Okay, well, just to kind of,
because we got to start from step A. We're starting because I have no position.
You do have a position.
You're basically saying I'm making a positive claim about something, and I'm not making any claims. What I'm asking,
Dwayne, I think it's best if we be honest, because we both have positions. We both have worldviews.
Yeah, what is it? What your worldview is that you believe that a God exists. That is a positive claim.
To define it even more particularly, I believe that I believe in the Christian God. Not right. I don't believe in a generic a God, right? Like,
I mean, but at the end of the day, I'm saying you believe in a God. Like, you have a belief that a God exists. It's a God.
No, that's not our claim. That's maybe how you would explain it. However, our claim, our position is not merely a God. It is the God, the only God.
Okay, so that's a claim too. But what I'm saying is your position is essentially that you believe that the Christian God is the God.
Correct.
Okay.
So in essence, we're not arguing for general theism.
Okay, yeah. So you're specifically arguing two claims, both that a God exists and that God is the Christian God.
We're arguing that the Christian
God exists.
That's our claim. That's our starting point.
Yeah.
It's not two claims. It is the claim.
It's a single claim that maybe a few things flow from it.
Yeah, so let's agree that that's your claim. Okay. What is it that you believe my claim is? Because I don't have a positive claim.
There is no God.
No, that's not my claim. That is actually
all right.
Yeah, so anti-theism. You believe that no gods exist, and so an atheist has no belief in a God, and some anti-theists believe that no gods exist.
Let me ask you this: you do agree that there are multiple levels of atheism out there, because that would be considered a strong atheist. At least, I mean, I've dealt with this with major.
An atheist is someone that does not
without a God. Just the etymology of the word is without a God. You are without a God.
Yeah, the etymology is without a God. You have no belief in a God.
You're adding that. You're adding that in there is what I'm saying. I'm saying.
Someone that believes that no gods exist is an entirely different position, and I'm going to explain how. When you go to court, do you vote on whether or not they are guilty or innocent, or whether they're guilty or not guilty?
Well, I mean, I would say that ultimately you are doing both.
No, you're not. So are you saying
doing both?
If you are not convinced that someone is guilty, does that mean
I'm saying they're innocent?
Hold on, Dwayne. That's actually proving the point that we're coming from. We don't believe anyone is neutral concerning this topic, but you're trying to put yourself in a position of neutrality.
That's not true. I don't believe that no gods exist.
So what is your claim?
I don't have a claim. I'm just not convinced that any of the current gods that have been proposed to me, I don't hold a.
All right, let's move the conversation, because maybe I want to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it because there's lack of evidence that you're making that claim, or is it because you're not a big fan of the options?
Well, I'm not convinced that, based on what I believe is morality, that I get that morality, or that I believe that a God wrote any of the moral principles that are given in the Bible. But if you want to, for the sake of debate, I would be willing to debate you on my arguments against Christianity.
I would prefer that you stick to your affirmative beliefs, like what you actually believe, instead of just merely for discussion's sake. I think that'll prove to be a little bit better of a conversation, simply because in order, if you're going to postulate a situation of a theoretical situation or belief.
No, it's not theoretical. I'm saying I can say I do believe that there are good reasons to not believe, and I would be willing to discuss those, because that's an actual conversation to have. Okay, but so not holding a belief in a God isn't really a conversation.
Sure. Now I would say that you're more of an agnostic at that point, because that point you're just like, I don't know, or I'm not convinced that there is one.
I'm not. It's not that I don't know what I believe. I believe that an agnostic is not sure if they believe in a God or they don't. I don't currently believe in a God, but I don't believe that necessarily no gods exist.
So that's actually not what agnosticism is. Agnosticism isn't whether they're not sure if they do or don't believe. They're not sure if there is one or not. That's the claim. Those are two different statements.
Yeah, but I don't believe that a God exists, which makes me an atheist.
Atheist. Okay. I mean, I can accept
the etymology that he just mentioned.
I can accept that. Yeah. Now, what I obviously would affirm is not that you don't believe in a God. I certainly believe that you don't believe in a God. I would say that you know God exists and that you are without excuse. And the reason I say that is because if you're a Christian, you know this very well, is Romans chapter 1 starts out in verse 18 with this, okay? And we can get into a little bit more detail after this if you need me to explain any further. But Romans chapter 1, starting in verse 18, makes this statement. It says, "The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them." So in other words, not only do you know that God exists, you suppress the truth because of your unrighteousness, and God has given you evidence. The very evidence that you seek for or do not accept as evidence, God, the one who is in control of all things, the one who is sovereign over all creation, the one who gave you breath and life and lets you blaspheme his name by the rejection of him. It says that these invisible attributes he has given you to see them, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. Even though you know God, you neither honor him as God or give thanks, but became futile in their speculations or minds, and their foolish heart was darkened. And that foolish word is not a derogatory term of your personhood, but merely the information that God says, since he is the one who's in charge of how things work in this world, he has provided you the very evidence that you're rejecting. So, and you're deciding to put it aside because you're saying my morality, scale seems to be better than God's, the one who actually creates morality.
So the two assumptions there is we're assuming that God has something to do with what's written in this book, Romans. And I'm trying to bridge those ideas together. How did you come to believe, or what is your reason for believing that God has something to do with Romans 8:38. Why do you believe that God?
So here's ultimately our starting point and our foundation. We have to start with God unless we're reduced to absurdity. And we can get into some of those complexities in a bit. You brought up morality, and that's something I definitely want to discuss. But even things like truth, and even I would say the fact that we having a reasonable conversation has already proven our worldview to be true and not yours.
Wow.
Yeah, and
actually, I'll explain that, because atheism does not give agnosticism, anti-theism does not give you a foundation for objective truth and reasoning.
I would say that there are three things ultimately that only the Christian worldview can justify. One being the uniformity of nature, the reason we can confidently say that the next 5 seconds are going to be like the last 5 seconds. The reason why the gravity holds us on the ground. The laws of the law. Well, I'm going to list the three, and then we can get into more of the details. The laws of logic as well, the way that they work, the reason that we can reason, and ultimately ethics, morality.
What is ethics and morality? Can you define morality?
Yeah, that which is right or wrong according to God.
So you're saying that you just argued that morality is subjective.
No, because it's objective, because it comes from an absolute standard. I'm saying because it comes from an absolute standard, it makes it objective.
It doesn't, though, because for something to be objective, it has to be independent from everything. Objective would mean that whether or not God said it or not, morality would be what it was. So if God said to do something that was immoral,
sure,
then that means that whatever is moral would still be moral outside of what God said, even if it was immoral.
Here's the point that Rob is making. Morality, or that which is good, is because it flows from the character of God.
That's right.
And how do you use a moral?
Now let me ask you this, since it has to deal with morality and your position. Is your position that there's no such thing as absolute morality, absolute good or absolute evil? Is that your position?
Yes.
So you agree with Dawkins, and let me read this quote. He says, "The universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect there is. At bottom, no design, no purpose, no good, no evil, nothing but pitiless indifference." You would agree with that statement?
No.
What about that would you disagree?
I don't think that there's pitiless indifference.
Why not? Given that there is no good or evil.
Well, good and evil has to do with well-being. So the reason why we don't kill babies is not because there's an inherently measurable, quantifiable amount of goodness that comes from not killing babies. It has to do with the well-being that you and I both would like for our children to be alive.
Would it be
evil? We agree on that principle.
Would it be evil?
That's our desire. We desire to have children alive.
I would disagree with your position.
I would desire your children to be alive.
I would say that's not the reason why it's good or not good. I don't determine morality based on the outcome of a particular situation. I determine it based on the fact on whether or not God has stated whether or not it's good. You see, killing is not wrong simply because it hurts somebody else. Killing is wrong ultimately because God is the God of life.
So do we not have are you saying that?
I would say murder. I would say murder. I distinguish murder and killing. So let me change my word from killing to murder, because I believe there is a difference.
I'm so glad you said that, because let's say you killed someone on accident. Did you do something wrong?
No, I mean, there could be times where it's
something immoral if you killed someone on accident.
Well,
I believe there should still be some kind of
consequence,
but maybe not life.
So if someone completely killed someone on accident, did they do something immoral?
Yes.
In one sense, yeah. It's just not as bad as intent going out to kill.
Yeah, the punishment, and I don't want to equate whether or not something was more wrong than another based on the level of the consequence or whether or not they should receive a consequence. Because I can do something wrong for, seemingly a righteous reason, but it still is ultimately wrong.
Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, sure. Stealing.
And
stealing.
what
Like,
reason is there?
If somebody is desperate for food, right? They're literally dying of hunger,
Right.
and they steal food. The act of stealing is still wrong, whether or not it was because you were hungry.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, you can make the argument that this person was trying to feed themselves and stay alive. Well, ultimately, that's great and all. It still doesn't negate the fact that stealing is morally wrong. It wasn't yours to take, whether or not it was going to sustain your life.
Absolutely. So why is stealing objectively wrong?
Because God is not a thief.
So if there was nothing to be stolen, would stealing be wrong? If no one had property, could you steal?
That's an impossible scenario, I believe, and I wouldn't
Well,
even agree with that scenario.
If there's no human beings on Earth, would stealing be wrong?
That type of a hypothetical, I wouldn't even appropriate with an answer, simply because I would say that that's an impossible situation.
Well, no, it's not, because there was a time on Earth where there were no humans.
How do you know that?
The evidence that we have points in that direction.
Are you certain about that?
No.
Okay, so that's kind of one of the points that we're going to continue to point out, is that if you cannot say for certain things, we're going to call you out on it.
Anything. So let's be clear on that in the beginning.
So Dwayne,
you guys are the ones claiming to be certain.
Wait, Dwayne, the fact that you said that killing babies was not good for human well-being, you now admit that you weren't certain about that, though.
What are you saying?
You stated earlier, about 5 minutes ago, that killing babies is bad for the well-being of others.
Yes, it is.
But now you assert that you're actually not sure about that.
No, I'm not, because I feel like there could be potentially areas where human beings could. Well, actually, no, I'm certain about that. So
So what is
the reason I'm certain about that is because I'm certain about what the consequences of killing a baby is, and I know for certain that it's not the desirable outcome for human beings based on what we've experienced with babies dying.
Okay.
Who defines this well-being?
I
think
he cut out a little bit there.
I think he kind of.
Hey, Dwayne, you're cut out there.
We didn't hear that part. You kind of froze.
I said we do, because we're the ones having the experience. So
who's we?
Human beings, the people that are experiencing the consequences of other human beings' actions directly.
What if people decided, you know what? I think it actually, you have 51% or whatever percentage you want to say that makes something well-being for society, says, you know what, this is a good thing for us to do. Kind of like slavery. Majority of people said, hey, you know what, stealing a human being and killing and wiping them out and making them serve you is actually a morally good thing. Why were they wrong?
Because
if they were wrong.
So they were wrong because what we learned later on, and
hold on, wait, not at that moment. Let's transport ourselves to 1700s.
Yeah.
Why could you look at these slave owners and say you're wrong now, rather than looking back on it?
Oh, it's wrong because the outcome of that slavery has on society as a whole is the effects are negative.
Well,
I can think of some good things.
I can think of good things that happened. They flourished. They had free labor. They were able to really get the land cultivated quite well.
That's exactly what they did.
Those are all positive things that I can think of.
I completely agree.
And majority of people agreed with it.
Yeah, and socially, what happens is we figured that the cons essentially outweighed the pros, and so we stopped the practice essentially.
Well, so your argument for that slave owner who's getting this free labor, all this crops, you say there's a lot of bad reasons. Don't you think he would look at you and be like, I don't see any?
Yeah, but the thing is that morality is a choice, right? So you have the choice to behave morally.
Let me ask you a question about this then.
You have the choice to be concerned with someone else's well-being, and you also have the choice not to. So if you're not concerned with that person's well-being, then of course, then you're not really going to have an issue.
But that actually begs the question, because morally, why should one care?
You don't have to care. If you care about their well-being, then you do, and if you don't, then you don't care. So you don't care about morals.
But that's the point.
About well-being. You don't have to be moral. There's nobody forcing you to be moral.
I would say you
do moral things all the time.
You are obligated to be moral.
No, you're not. Nobody who's enforcing this laws because people are being immoral.
God.
Yeah,
I would say God.
So are you saying that people are not behaving immorally?
No, I'm saying they do.
We're saying we're obligated.
People are obligated to, and they'll have to answer one day to God for their actions. That's what the Bible says.
Well, that's another claim. But as far as when we were talking about objective morality in the case, you have a choice to be moral or not. That's the whole idea. It's if you don't have a choice to be moral, then it's an oxymoron that it's considered being moral.
I think maybe
you're forced to do it. It's not morality.
Yeah, I think we overspoke on some things because we're not arguing that point. What we're arguing is, all right, go ahead.
I can hear you.
Yeah, no problem. I want everyone to know that even though that we are going back and forth, we have much respect for him. He's made in the image of God, we believe. We affirm that he's got value and worth. So if you guys are watching and you're like, oh, wow, this is getting a little sticky at points where it feels like jabs, so that's just the nature of this kind of conversation. So just know that we certainly do affirm that he is somebody who has value and worth, and we want to respect him, and we affirm, I do at least, that he's been respecting us as well through this conversation. But I don't think that that's what we were arguing, Dwayne. What we're saying is that there's objective moral truths, not whether or not people can decide whether or not they're going to behave that way. And again, that's another question that we can answer as Christians on why people don't. However, what we're saying is that there are definite rights and wrongs, and it's not just because it makes people feel good or feel bad, or someone
benefits society
as a whole, because you can find people with different values that they seem it's going to benefit them. Cannibals benefit from eating people, when in fact, I obviously would say that that's terrible. I'm sorry, say that again, man.
You're saying that cannibals benefit from eating people?
Yes.
Yeah, they're filling their stomach. They're feeding their hunger.
Thieves.
Yeah,
from stealing from others.
If all humans decide to be cannibals, what's the likelihood of the survival of the human race?
But you're assuming that we should care about that.
Yeah.
You don't have to care. I'm not assuming we should care.
No, you're ascribing value to that by positioning that point of view in the first place.
The benefit of us not being cannibals is that we all have a greater chance of surviving.
I'm not saying that that's not a benefit. What I'm saying that is not that's not an objective standard by which we can determine whether or not it's good or bad, because if half the society or a quarter of the society decided to become cannibals, it's really not going to make all that much of a difference. You can populate your own little community by having baby maker women and just creating these children that are meant for that particular purpose, and that doesn't affect whether or not your position of that is true or not, because ultimately it's not really affecting the rest of the society.
Well, if we go back to well-being, we can pretty clearly both agree on reasons why forming villages of society and eating babies isn't good for the well-being of the children. And you're
missing.
Let me finish.
Go ahead.
If you agree that killing babies isn't in their best interest and you care about that, that's probably going to be one of the biggest motivating factors in keeping you from doing it. And if you don't care about that, then you're going to eat babies and no one's going to stop you.
Dwayne,
What about the well-being of the person doing the eating? They seem it's doing just fine. Why do they automatically assume
hold on,
that it has to be the well-being of the child?
let me interject.
Why do they need to be concerned with it?
Correct.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I'm saying they don't have to be concerned with it if they're not. But being moral is simply choosing to participate in the well-being of the society that encompasses all of us.
Dwayne,
if you're concerned with the well-being of other people, that's essentially what morality is. Not killing someone has to do with the well-being of someone else, not yourself.
okay,
You not kill someone for you. You not kill someone because we as a society have agreed upon principles that would allow society to continue to survive.
I want to
well-being on, and it arrives us at the exact same places. Because everything that you believe is moral, I can say is moral for reasons that relate to well-being. So we really arrive at very, very similar positions because morality is essentially about well-being.
All right, Dwayne, I want to raise a objection that I've kind of seen that I'm not trying to offend you, but maybe you haven't thought through, because you've raised the position that morality is subjective, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, but then you've obstructed a pillar of objectiveness that people should follow of this well-being. Don't you see the contradiction with that?
No, I don't, because the people don't have to follow it. It's if you have an understanding of well-being, that is where you will arrive. Because being moral is being concerned with what other people, the well-being of society.
Objectively or subjectively?
Morality doesn't have anything to do with your individual self.
Could you explain that a little further?
So you agree not to kill my children because I'll agree not to kill your children. Do you see how that's mutually beneficial?
So it's just a convention. It's just a social contract at that point.
Correct. I mean,
so then it's not objective.
Correct.
And if it didn't,
but you asserted that it was.
Well, it's objective in the sense that we know for a shadow of doubt that is mutually beneficial for both of us, as opposed to the latter.
But it's arbitrary.
Yeah. If it's arbitrary, it's not objective.
I believe that everything is essentially arbitrary, but what is objective is the consequences that we know to be true.
So you do agree with Dawkins' statement that it's just blind, pitiful indifference. That's literally arbitrary.
Not in that way.
So in some way?
What I'm saying is that without an independent person, like for instance, if having sex before marriage is immoral, then when two cows have sex, is that immoral?
Let me back up real quick, if I may. Dr. Will Provine, a professor at Cornell University, he said this: there's no such thing as immanent morality. Essentially, he's just saying that morality is just kind of made up and we kind of make it up as we go along. Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, and I think the evidence points towards that. Like, for instance, society practiced slavery for a very long time. And then for some odd reason, all humans started to agree that we shouldn't practice it.
So are you willing to say that at some point in time, slavery is moral?
No.
Then you're just contradicting yourself then.
No. I don't think you're understanding. So people are practicing slavery, right?
Yeah.
And the consequence, there's obviously the practice had consequences, right?
For who?
For society at large.
Yeah, I mean, some of them benefited quite well for a long time.
Absolutely, and many that did
consequences.
They wanted to continue,
yeah.
But the consequences at large for society ended up determining that they didn't want to accept that practice anymore because they didn't feel like it was good for society, so they stopped. And let me give you another argument. I'll take this a step further and say that. Let me go. I actually wrote this down.
Okay.
So the moral argument, atheism predicts moral rules will only come from human beings, will begin deeply flawed, and will be improved by experiment over thousands of years. So
here's the point.
Of society have changed and progressed over thousands and thousands of years. So what we accept as a society, as what we believe we should and should not do, has constantly changed as time has gone along.
How do you know society?
Exactly.
How do you know society has progressed, given that you don't have an objective to compare it to?
Well, has society improved since slavery ended?
Well, I can answer that question because I have an objective definition of morality. But given that
So are you saying that without a God, you can't understand why slavery the ending of slavery has impacted society in a positive?
No, that's not at least my position. My position is that you don't have an adequate justification to say that it's absolutely wrong. You simply can.
I don't believe it's absolutely wrong.
Yeah,
I want everybody to hear that. Okay, I want everyone to really pay attention to what you just said.
It's not.
Okay, slavery isn't absolutely wrong. I think that is an atrocious statement. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to insult Dwayne. I love Dwayne.
What I'm saying
but I think that is a terrible position to hold, and I think that's simply due to the fact that you're rejecting God, my friend, and you need to repent and believe in Jesus.
Because it's wrong, though. Slavery is not wrong because there's a quantifiable measure of how bad slavery is. It's because
we agree.
We know the consequences of slavery, and we agree that that's not good for human beings. So it all, at the end of the day, it all goes back to the well-being of someone else.
If
it's not about the effects that it has on someone else, slavery, then what's wrong with it?
So let me ask you this, Dwayne, because I think I understand your position. Your position seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we come to understand well-being by experiencing this thing that causes either good or bad.
So not good or bad, because I don't
well-being.
But here's the thing: I don't think that something's necessarily good and necessarily bad. I think that what we have is cause and effect, and then we decide what actions we should take based on whether or not the effects are desirable. If the effects are not desirable, then we tend to do away with practice that's undesirable, or that has undesirable consequences, onto something that does produce desirable consequences.
Okay, so before the transatlantic slave trade, what would be someone's I guess, how would they know whether stealing someone from their homeland was good or evil, because they haven't experienced that yet? How would they know it was actually an undesirable thing?
So the way that I see this happening is, let's say that you have a village of 10 people. Okay, so we have a village, there's 10 people in it, and someone steals something from someone in the village. So someone in the village goes outside and says to the 10 neighbors, like, hey guys, let me gather you guys around. I'm missing one of my things. Someone stole it. And I don't like that someone stole my things. And from an empathetic position, if someone actually cares that this person has lost their possession, then they're going to agree with that person that, we shouldn't steal because it has undesirable effects.
Can I ask you then, based on that position that you just espoused, would it logically follow that says that then therefore the majority rules in that situation?
No, not that the majority rules. The person that steals doesn't consider the well-being of that person. So for instance, if you care about my well-being, would you kill me?
Of course not.
Okay, and if you don't care about my well-being, could you kill me?
I'm not following.
Not you. So does someone that kills someone, does that person care about the person they killed's well-being?
No, they don't.
No.
Okay. So does someone that steals from someone care about the person that they stole from well-being?
Here's the point.
They care about their own.
Here's the point I was trying to make.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So morality is making the choice to act on behalf of someone else's well-being. That's all it is. And if you don't make that choice, it has undesirable consequences at large, right? And the more of it that there is, the more undesirable consequences there are.
Yeah.
Less undesirable.
That could be okay, go ahead.
Because here's the point I was trying to strive at, because from what you've just stated, I would have to commit this act to know if it was undesirable or not. So in your from your view, I would have to murder someone to know, well, this ain't a good thing to do.
No, you wouldn't. So are you saying that you have to? Do you know right now as a person that you do you have to kill someone to know why killing is wrong?
I'm saying for the worldview that you just espoused. I know
you don't. So that's totally crazy because I don't have to kill someone to know why it would be undesirable to kill them or why it would produce undesirable effects. You don't have to kill someone.
So how would you know that it was undesirable?
So you're saying that
I'm asking.
I'm just saying. So you're saying that we don't know that killing people produces undesirable results in society?
That's not what we're saying. That's not what we're saying. We're asking from your perspective.
Well-being, right? Because if I care about this person's well-being, I can't kill them, right? Those two things can't happen. I can't also care about their well-being and
sure, but you can make the argument at this point now. Well, let me postulate this. Okay, let's use the concept of communism. Okay, taking from one person's belongings to collectively benefit a bigger mass of people. I certainly would benefit from the masses giving me something that I personally didn't have to work for. I would certainly benefit from that. And we would see it on a much grander scale where people would benefit, in theory at least, where something from you is given to me. That doesn't necessarily benefit you, but it can benefit me and K-Dub and Joe and John and Steve and all these other people.
So, and that actually leads me right back to my point, because you and I agree that socialist nations, that we don't line up with the belief that that's in the best interest of our well-being. We agree on that, right?
We have different foundations for why.
Yeah, and I would
we agree on that because here's my point.
Not because it affects a society.
I feel like it's not objective. If it was objective, then why don't people that participate or create socialist societies do so?
Wait, that's fallacious, because it's like saying if 2 + 2 = 4, then why do people get the wrong answer? I mean, people follow
the wrong system.
Right. You think that they think that they're not doing the right thing, or that they don't think that it's in their best interest?
That's irrelevant.
No, because there's a difference in opinion on what we believe is in the best interest of our well-being, which is why
right.
Two different societies shape two different ways, because two different groups of people disagree on what is in the interest of their well-being. They believe that socialism is in the best interest of the well-being of the society of the people that want to live in that system. We live in this system because we believe this is in our best interest.
Who's right?
Who's absolutely right?
I don't think that I don't have an authority to assert that this is necessarily absolutely right. What I can say is I agree that this is what's in my best interest. So I live here with people that share that position. And if I did not have that position, then I would more than likely live with a society of people that agreed with that position. So that's what happens in societies, right? Societies kind of agree on rules, and we all kind of agree that what's in our best interest, and people that have similar ideas tend to live together. It's forming tribes.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. You know, I from what you said, I would think, I know you would say that murder is wrong, right? And you know, right. But according to the society, they determine their well-being, right?
Do they determine their well-being?
A society determines a well-being, right? For the society, a nation, or
no. So the individual decides for himself what is in his best interest, and then he lives around with people that share similar beliefs.
Okay.
Right? So if you're a murderer, the consequences of you thinking it's okay to kill people is that people don't want to live with you. And society, right, is going to put you in jail because the majority of the society does not agree with your position that is an okay action to take on behalf of the society.
So collectively, it would be because of these individuals agree, and they in the society they come together.
Which is exactly why you have different societies living with different rules.
So would it be wrong for a society to come and impede their morality on another?
What'd you say?
Would it be wrong for another society to come impede their set of well-being on another? Given that what you just stated.
I don't know how you could do.
Should another nation come into another nation and impose their morality on that nation? Would that be right or wrong?
I don't think that it would. I think it would. Like, I don't know. I don't think in those, like, a black and white term. Like, I don't think that that's in my best interest for them to do.
So when America went into, Germany to stop what was going on in that Holocaust, you would say that was not in America's best interest or your best interest for America to do that?
Well, I think it was. So it was good in the sense that it protected the well-being of people.
So were there negative effects?
No, there was no negative effects of. I mean, yeah, there was negative effects, but there was also positive effects.
So
yeah, actually, to explain that, I had to think about it because there was positive and negative effects. So, for instance, there was probably German women living in Germany during the time of war, and if Americans went down there and killed their husband, was that good for the well-being of their children? No, but collectively, getting rid of a society that thought it was okay to kill all of those Jews, in the grand scheme of things, the idea is that the overall, the ends justified the means. So the end result of ending
pragmatism
outweighed the bad things that happened when you killed that German woman's son's dad, or when that man was gunned down and his kid was looking through the window and he seen an American soldier kill his parent. Those aren't good things, but society agreed, at least from the United Nations. So again, here's another example of how this works. You have the United Nations, which is representatives of collective societies that come together and make a decision on whether or not we should do something that has potentially big consequences on both sides. Like, a lot happened there. You see what I'm saying? Was it good for that guy when the Americans went in there, and even though they ended in a genocide? I mean, was it good, the American soldiers that broke into that apartment and accidentally threw a grenade down and it killed a 3-year-old? Is that good? No.
Yeah, but I have a moral justification for those things. Yours seems to be arbitrary, and it's like, because depending where you are,
arbitrary at all, because all of what I'm saying has to do with the well-being of someone else. So
you gave the example. You gave the example of where maybe killing that particular person isn't necessarily a good thing, but other people benefit. But that person that you just killed for the benefit of the society didn't receive that benefit that you're talking about. So it seems like what you're doing is you're subjecting particular situations by changing moral compasses according to individual circumstances.
Well, so let me ask you this. Was it bad? What should the Americans have gone into Germany and did what they did?
Yes.
Absolutely. Why?
Because they were enslaving people and killing millions of people. And I would say that they were doing something completely wicked, completely against the image of God. And of course, for righteous reasons, mainly because God says we are to love our neighbor, right? We are to love our neighbor, and the most loving thing that we could have done for those people is go on and eradicate the wicked Nazis.
Are you saying that God? You're saying that God has a problem with slavery?
No, I'm saying that God has a problem with slavery as we know it. The Bible speaks of slavery in not terms that that are current to what we know as slavery.
Well,
It was indentured servitude. Many of these people had to be in this particular situation. They were still affirmed as being people who are imago Dei. I'm sorry?
Can you beat an indentured servant?
The Bible said that at one point that was allowed if they did something wrong. It was the same thing as if you received a penalty for doing something wrong. When people now, well, we don't have that type of economy now.
But what's wrong with it? Is it wrong?
Well, the Bible says if you can be free, be free.
But is it wrong though to have indentured servants and beat them?
The Bible is not promoting the idea of beating slaves. If you're quoting the text from Leviticus where it says if you beat a slave and he does not die, pretty much, don't.
Yeah, so what's wrong with that? That's why I'm asking. Why can't you beat your slave, and if he doesn't die, then what is so immoral about slavery?
That's the point. That's what I'm addressing. It's actually
not promoting the positive action of doing so.
But why doesn't God say that He doesn't want you to do that?
Because the Bible actually does say in Leviticus, the chapter, I think either before or after, to love your neighbor.
Love your neighbor.
So if you love your neighbor, you won't beat them, nor will you eat them or steal them.
But it says that it's okay to beat them, though.
It actually does not say
it does not say that.
Even
can you bring out that verse?
Absolutely, sir. Give me 1 second. And which version did you prefer it in?
I mean, King James is fine, but we use the NASB or the ESV, the English Standard Version.
Is King James fine? Do you feel like the King James is the most?
That's fine. No, I don't believe that's the most accurate translation.
Okay. Because, I mean, it was written in Old English, so.
It actually was written.
Well, I'm saying that the Bible we read is Old English.
No, not the Bible I read. I don't read the King James. No, I'm fine with the King James if that's what you have available.
Okay.
And ultimately, I want to point out before you even read that verse, I want you to consider this, okay? Because I care about you, man. I really like you. The Bible says that these things, first and foremost, are spiritually discerned. So for even to engage in proper understanding of what the Bible means, the Bible says you must be born again. And the only way for you to be born again is if you repent of your sins and trust in Jesus Christ. That's the first statement. The second thing is that when you are saying that you have a problem with the morality of the Bible, I want to remind you that ultimately you're saying that there's no true objective morality. There's no ultimate standard that says something is absolutely wrong. So when you bring up a judgment against the God that you truly do believe in and know in your heart of hearts, you're bringing up a charge against him. And the Bible says you will not be held blameless for that.
Okay.
That verse you were looking for is Exodus 21, 20 and 21 as well.
Yeah, read it for me.
Yeah. And I want to show you how you're misreading this verse. That's why context is important. When a man strikes his slave, male or female, with a rod and the slave dies under his hand, he shall be avenged. But if the slave survives a day or two, he is not to be avenged, for the slave is his money. So many atheists will try to bring this out. It's like, well, as long as you don't kill him, then it's okay. But that's why you got to keep reading, because verse 20
have to be punished as long as
no.
There's no consequences to his actions unless
yes, it is. Read verse 26 and 27. When a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free because of his eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his slave, male or female, he shall let the slave go because of his tooth. So there are consequences to beating the mess out of your slave.
The consequences that you have to let the slave go.
Correct.
Exactly.
But it doesn't say that you shouldn't have slaves.
Yeah. What's the problem with that? Give me an objective moral reason why that is wrong.
You've already confessed that.
What I'm saying is that if we're saying that we can get our morals or an objective moral value from the Bible, then I don't see how you could say that we shouldn't be able to have slaves.
I think when you're reading this,
why can't I have slaves if slaves make me money?
Because you would be stealing a person.
I don't. What if I don't steal them?
How would you obtain them?
What if they just want to
They're
be
like a butler, like a butler in your house?
no, like a slave? Like
That's indentured servitude. I got a job. I got a boss.
Yeah, bro. I mean,
no, I'm not gonna pay the slave.
Are they were to care for them. They were to essentially give them a wage, which was feeding them, caring for them, housing them. I mean, whether
Sounds like a job to me.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
ultimately,
it's not okay for your boss to just beat you up at work. What's wrong with that?
I have a reason why that's wrong, because God says not to. They're made in the image of God.
But he doesn't. He says as long as your boss doesn't beat you to death in 3 days, what's wrong with that?
I read the verse which demonstrated that was not true.
But I'm saying
he does not say it's okay to beat your. He's saying if this is something that you did, there are consequences for it, which is you need to let that person go. In my mind, I'm hearing mercy.
Here. I'll read an even more clear text, even in that same context, verse 23 and 24. If there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. So the point is, whatever punishment you're putting on this person unjustly, you got to pay for it. The very thing you're saying isn't addressed is addressed 2 verses later.
Well, it certainly doesn't say that you shouldn't have slaves. So,
but you've already confessed slavery. I mean, it's
ultimately not even wrong.
I don't know how if we could say that it's wrong though. I'm just saying based on the Bible,
I never said the Bible says that slavery in the context that it explains it is wrong.
Right.
That was the economy that the Israelite community was living in under the new covenant, which is what I am a part of, which is what K-Dub is a part of, which is what all believers are a part of. It says, if you can be free, be free.
All right. And so I think you're reading this word slave and you're transporting transatlantic slave trade ideas into that. That's not what the Bible is communicating.
Well, are you saying that these slaves that were being beaten weren't property?
They, yeah, I mean, in some sense, but they were to be freed after 7 years. This wasn't a lifelong thing.
Not everyone, because
no, everyone. If you were a slave and worked off your debt, you were to be freed.
Yeah.
After 7 years.
Now the slave did have the option to stay.
This is what's called the year of Jubilee. After the year of Jubilee, that's would be the where the slave could go free if he so desired. But many times, if they had a good master, they would choose to stay. I'm going to have a better rate to survive here than out there on my own.
But in Leviticus 25:46, he talks about how you can take them as an inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them for possession.
That's not a contradiction that you could be freed after 7 years.
Yeah, but so in one point of the Bible, right, in Leviticus, you have God saying that you can pass slaves to your children, essentially. Yep. This is a lie. And then later, the rules on this moral concept change.
No.
So why is it that you had to free your slaves after 7 years and you could no longer pass them to your children? Why is that? Is it has to do with morality, or what's the reason?
You don't think in that 7 year period of them being a slave that the father, it could have been done in that period?
What could have been done?
I think you're assuming like there's this lifelong contract, and therefore that's why it says you can pass them to your slaves.
Well, it says they shall be your bondmen forever.
Well, yes, if they decided after that 7th year of Jubilee to stay.
Brethren, it says, but only over your brethren, the children of Israel, ye shall not rule over another with rigor.
Yeah.
Right.
So outside of their tribe, they were allowed to treat slaves really any kind of way. Unless it
doesn't say that.
Someone in your, well, it does. It says, and
with rigor,
as an inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them for possession. They shall be your bondmen forever. But over your brethren, the children of Israel, so if you were, right, so if you were
a slave,
Israelite, then you shall not rule over another Israelite with rigor.
No, but the point I'm having contention with what you just said was, you said they can treat them however they want. That's not the case. The Bible does not unequivocally allow for slaves under that economy to be treated however they wanted. They were still supposed to be treated with respect, as imago Dei, meaning in the image of God. While yes, there is some,
but it says that you shall take them as an inheritance for your children, unless they're from Israel.
Yeah. But given that I'm not sure why you're objecting, given that you've already given up a foundation for objecting to these things.
Well, my position on that is that if that's the case, even in that instance, it's God's morality is subjective, because he has this viewpoint only towards people that are from Israel. This does not include people that are not from Israel.
It's not wrong to have an indentured servitude
for life, and that you can pass to your children.
No, it's not wrong.
Okay.
I mean,
now
I am an indentured servitude in a sense, because I go to work. I work for this guy. In a sense, there is possession over me. I can't do what I want. I'm not free to do whatever I want.
Right, but you would have been allowed to they would have been allowed to beat you so long as you didn't die in 3 days for life.
We've already showed the text actually rejects that position. I read that verse.
You're saying that they weren't allowed to beat the slaves?
I read the verse where it says that.
Can you read it again?
In the same chapter where you claim that it's okay to beat the child.
Well, you can beat your child. It says, "Don't spare the rod, beat the child."
Sorry, beat this slave. I don't think there's any wrong with
There's nothing wrong with beating your children either, huh?
No, nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
Verses 22 through 24, or even through 27, but I'll just read what I read. But if there is any harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. Yeah, if you beat somebody, you're going to give them a stripe. So yeah, that would kind of qualify for not beating your slave. I mean, the Bible doesn't advocate for beating your slave like they're an animal or something.
I don't know, man.
What do you mean you don't know? I read
What I'm saying, I don't know. Even if we throw out beating your slave, having a slave that you can pass to your children, I still don't.
There's nothing wrong with it.
And if your slave is property, I still don't agree that that's.
I want to interject real quick and say that ultimately everybody apart from Jesus Christ is a slave, and even those in Jesus Christ are slaves, being that you are serving a particular master. I mean, John chapter 8 says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin." Now, I would postulate that ultimately it comes down to this. The reason that you reject God is because of ultimately you love your sin. There's things in your life that you would never want to give up. And unless the power of the Spirit comes upon you and changes you from the inside out, you'll always remain a slave to sin instead of a slave to righteousness. You see, that's really the difference. I'm sorry?
I don't have a good reason to be convinced that there's something called sin that I inherited from two people that don't really have any historical backing.
Well, I mean, you have the historical record. You just reject it.
What historical record?
The Bible.
And given that you can't know anything,
the Bible, you don't even know who wrote the Bible, though. Who are the authors of the Gospels?
Sure we can, but even to say because you don't know the author, therefore it's false. I mean, you would have to throw a lot of historical things away if that's the case.
Do you? Let me ask you this: do you believe in any documents of antiquity as being authentic?
Any documents?
Yeah.
Of course, I believe that some documents are authentic.
Okay, and how do you justify whether one is authentic versus not?
Well, so here's the thing. You guys have this thing about certainty. I don't believe that I'm certain about anything. All I have is I can say, I have stronger evidence to suggest something for me, then
Are
I
you
have.
certain about that?
So what'd you say?
Are you certain about that?
Am I certain about that?
Yeah, about what you just
About
said.
your uncertainty. Are you certain about your uncertainty?
Yeah, I'm certain about my uncertain. I am certain.
Don't you see the contradiction? Don't you see that contradiction?
No, say that again.
If you say there's no such thing as certainty, but I'm certain about that, that in and of itself is a contradiction.
Yeah, that's true. So no, I'm not certain about my uncertainty.
So you're uncertain even about your uncertainty.
But don't you see that vicious circle that you end up in, man?
No, because all we have is the methods that have been most reliable. That's all we have. All we can do is trust what is the most reliable.
You're not even certain about
the Bible is true is not a method. Faith, believing something that you don't have good evidence for, is not a reliable pathway to truth. You can have faith in anything.
Wait a
I can
second.
have faith that pixies fly across the moon on a winged pig, but that
sure.
How does
that doesn't make it true? I agree 100% with that statement.
And
just
Dwayne, I rejected that definition when you asked me to give my definition of faith. I don't believe faith is believing in that which has no
grounding in truth.
I actually stated the opposite. Faith is the assurance. That's what the Bible teaches. Not
that faith is the. But how did you come to be certain?
All right,
telepathic communication.
No,
I'd like to actually go down this line of questioning, because let me ask you this, Dwayne. Can the God that is described in the Bible, right, whether you affirm it or not, the way that the Bible affirms and describes the God of the scriptures is that he's all-knowing and all-powerful and everywhere. Mm-hmm. Can that God, logically following that definition, reveal himself to individuals in such a way that those individuals can know for certain that he exists?
Yes, and following that logic, couldn't a all-knowing, all-seeing
Oh, he dropped.
I think he dropped out for a second.
Yeah, we'll let him catch up. I hope everybody sees the holes in his argument, and brother, I really care for this dude. I really truly
he's
do.
A nice guy.
He's back. I think he's back. Is he? No, not yet.
I don't see him.
Not yet. I really do.
Oh, his laptop died. He's gonna
plug it in.
Yeah,
he's gonna plug it in. Laptop died. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's see. Plug it in. Let's see if he gets back on. Okay. So he said, "Hold on." Okay. Cool. But, bro, I mean, it really is a sad situation when we run into this, because they can't even see the folly of the line of reasoning that they go through, because they end up making statements like he just clearly stated, no, I'm not certain of my uncertainty. Yeah. And it's just like, how do we even more so be able to point this out to people, because I think he follows it, but I think he's trying to be consistent,
right,
and simply stick to his guns.
Yeah, that's kind of like the worst part of it. But and one of the main things I keep pressing is that he keeps having this. He keeps wanting to have this objective well-being people should follow in his back pocket, that he kind of like just pulls it out and like flashes it every so often, but then says morality is subjective. I'm like, you can't hold both. Like, and even he's like, well, you don't have to care. So boom, I shoot you, you died, and I don't have to care. But even he recognized nobody lives that way. Nobody lives like how you're saying people should live. And I mean, maybe I'll say that when he gets back on, because that shows the inconsistency. Like, you're saying this is how people should live, but you don't want to function like that society-wise. Like, you don't have to follow my standards or rules. I bet you would say that if you were a judge.
Yeah, and that's what I maybe want to point out when he gets back on, is that in order to live the way he lives, he has to borrow from our position,
right,
practically
Right.
in order to just move about in this world.
To even have this conversation, he's already adopted a worldview that's not his. He's assumed intelligibility, reason, logic, truth, morality. Because if I came in here cussing him out, he'd be like, hey, I'm out of here. And he would be right. But according to his worldview, he could just not prefer it.
Yeah.
He couldn't call me wrong for it.
Yep. There's a
And
bunch
not
of
that I would do
comments.
that.
There's a bunch of comments in the live feed here. How many of y'all in the comments? How many of y'all are believers? Let me know in there. I know Mario. I know Brother Jay.
Yeah. I think quite a few people.
I know Reformed Christian Apologetics. That's kind of self-evident. Built for Speed. Who else?
Yeah.
Any unbelievers in the chat? Anyone do you know of, brother?
I don't know if from all I know they're all Christian.
Okay. All right. So it's just a really sad thing because he's a real nice dude.
Yeah, really nice.
And he seems like he's smart. That's one thing I want people to understand is that even though people with their position hold the position they do, it doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. He's very intelligent, and he's back.
He's back.
Yeah.
All right,
man. We have to assume that first that this all-knowing, all-being deity exists, and then second, I can use that line of reasoning to say, okay, well, there is could logically a fairy that knows everything, is everywhere, and has all the power in the world. Could they convey a message that they were real to someone? Well, yeah, because we've already attributed that ability to this character.
Hold on, but how do you know that person exists?
Exactly, that's the question. How do we know?
No, you just postulated that scenario, and we're asking you, okay, provide evidence for that very, very statement.
That's what I'm saying. We have no reason to believe that there is a omnipotent, all-knowing God that is in the sky that wrote a book. I'm saying, what is the evidence, the justification for having that belief? How did you arrive at assurance that there was this God that wrote this book?
We're saying because he revealed himself. He chose to reveal himself in nature.
Like the scriptures say, through conscience, through nature,
through sharing and
revealing his law.
So how did God reveal himself in nature?
The skies declare God's glory.
Yeah, but
creation assumes a creator.
Yeah.
So that's by creation.
Things that exist.
The things that exist.
Things that
the fact that you are here, that I am here, assumes we've been created, right?
No.
So things come into existence without creating.
Poof.
You said, do things come into existence without creators?
Yeah, without a creator. Did my Mac laptop exist?
What is it?
Creator just came in existence.
What does it mean to exist?
Let me ask you this, Dwayne. Is there anything? Are you certain that you are here, or could it be possible that you live in the Matrix and that you're just a computer program?
Is that a possibility?
Yes.
It's a good question, actually. I think it's interesting. I think that my current position is that it's really complicated. The idea of consciousness itself, I think that there's just so much to learn about how consciousness works. And I don't think that all the tools and the answers are currently available to understand all the intricacies of how consciousness functions. Yeah. You know, so that's my answer to that. I don't have any definitive answers about how consciousness functions.
Okay, maybe I can ask this: what evidence? Because you said you've been presented evidence, and I'm assuming you find them all insufficient for you. What evidence would it take you to believe?
Well, let me go to some of the reasons why I don't believe.
Okay.
Because then that might give you a place to start.
All right.
You know what I mean? So there was a mass quantity of resurrection God religions during the time period in which the Bible was put together. There was various different cultures that are embedded within Judeo-Christianity. There's something called Zoroastrianism. You can look it up. And it was a small cult that derived in Iran. And, the concept was, it was the war of the good God versus the evil God. So in the original story of Zoroastrianism, ain't that a tongue twister? Say that 3 times fast. So, yeah. So during this storyline, Satan is not the devil. He's the evil God, and God is the good God. So it's a light versus dark story. And the idea is that the world is going to end and God's justice will be actualized. And that a river of fire will be sent by God and will flow over the universe and burn everything up. And then a new, better world will be created in its place. And all the good people will be resurrected by God to live in that new world happily ever after. So that is the story of Zoroastrianism. And that's from Iraq. And there was a war going on during that time because some of these, the cults that were creating these stories were having wars with one another. So when I read Zechariah 14:12 through 19, and I'm just going to read it for you really quickly. It says, "And this shall be the plague whereby Jehovah will smite all the people that have warred against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall rot away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall rot away in their sockets, and their tongue shall rot away in their mouth, and the same plague that shall befall the horse, the mule, the camel, the ass, and all the beasts that shall be in their camps. And it shall come to pass that anyone that is left of all the nations that came against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to worship the King Jehovah of hosts." So when I read that, you can tell what the perspective of the people living within that culture at the time was, in this idea that, once a year, everyone from every part of the earth was going to be able to visit Jerusalem, essentially. So we have an idea of what their perception of how big the world was. And in the next passage, it says, "And if the family of Egypt go not up and come not, neither shall rain be upon them. There will be that plague too, whereby Jehovah will smite the nations that go not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of all the nations that go not up to keep the Feast of the Tabernacles." So the conquered nations during the writings of that time, I can actually, I don't have them all right here handy on my phone, but I can actually send you guys some links if you want the links, I can go into the different ones. But the ones that we have that have the resurrection stories are Osiris, Romulus, Adonis, Inanna, and Zalmoxis. With Inanna, she has the crucifixion and resurrection story. So she goes to hell and is pinned on a cross, and she rises out of heaven, or she rises out of the hells. She goes down into the hells and she's crucified, and she rises out of the hells in 3 days. And that was the story of Inanna. And
that doesn't seem like a resurrection to me, though.
No, let me ask you.
It's a resurrection. So she comes back to life, and all of the chosen people, ascend with her into, the new world and everything like that. It's a similar story with the cults that were in the nations that surrounded where the writings took place. And then when I think about Josephus, which is, the first historian to write about Jesus, he does so almost 100 years after the events take place, but no other people around during that time or neighboring nations wrote about a lot of the miracle stories and things like that. So that's one of my my thought process where I'm just not particularly convinced yet, just because of some of those reasons. And I'm going to end pretty soon. I just had a few more things I wanted to mention before you guys respond.
All right.
Also, my other thing is, you know, 99.9% of the universe is a lethal radiation-filled vacuum that life can't survive in. And most of the material in the universe composes stars and black holes on which nothing can live. And all the other material in the universe, space dust, asteroids, planets, moons, is barren of life, or is very, at the least, very inhospitable. So, you know, in the sense that, you know, we are like, or the idea that we are like a special creation, that the earth was put here just for us, and that line of thinking, I kind of say I disagree with that for the reasons that I was just kind of mentioning. But go ahead, and I've kind of given you a lot there, so let me go ahead and let you respond to that.
Well, I'll just say one thing. I'll let Rob interject, but I can tell you watch Zeitgeist. So
I don't know what that is.
Zeitgeist is pretty much what you
just said. It just is a breakdown of, hey, these are similar religions that were around, similar accounts of things, and simply what I would state is there's a perfectly easy explanation for that. The fact that everyone tries to rip off the actual biblical account. Why? Because there are false gods, there are false deities. These are
these
men.
stories came before the Christian story came out, actually.
I'd like to see your documentation on that, because
sure, absolutely.
I'm just saying.
I looked up one, and it was actually not before the Old Testament. So
sure, yeah. I'll send them on over to you.
And I would say,
you gotta remember that the Old Testament is actually the Torah.
Correct.
Right. So before it was even a Christian, teaching, it was a Jewish teaching.
Well, Christianity is the fulfillment of Judaism.
Judaism, yeah.
Why don't Jews believe that?
Because they're not Christians.
Because they're not Christian. They haven't been born again. Well, here's an easy refutation of everything you just said regarding the age of these other supposed religions. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You can't get any further behind that.
Why do we assume that is true?
Because God stated so. Because God breathed, according to 2 Timothy, this is God breathed.
Again, you're starting with the assumption that the Bible is true. I'm asking you why you're convinced of that.
Let me
never get there.
Because I want to see if we're on the same page. It seems like your assertion is the reason why I reject Christianity is because there are similarities.
No, I reject Christianity because I don't have good reason to believe that there's an all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful God that wrote the Bible.
But
there's no reason for me to. I haven't, and you guys haven't even given me any reason to believe that either. You've just said that I believe the Bible is true because the Bible says so.
That's actually not what
we're saying.
I believe the Bible is true because of the impossibility of the contrary.
Because the impossibility, what is the contrary? Because
you're assuming any other position is the contrary.
Okay, so how did you go about measuring how likely each position was?
Well,
what was your method?
Here's the thing: no person ever has examined every truth to come to their position. No, it's impossible to do.
Impossible. Otherwise, you'd be God.
So how did you? What method did you use to say that the Christian ideology is more likely than the other ones that I've examined? And what
that's not our position.
Consist of?
That's not our position. I want to clarify that. The position that we hold, and I believe I can speak for K-Dub in this instance as well, is that the God of the entire universe, the one who upholds everything according to the word of his power, the one who makes everything stand still.
I get you. We get it. All knowing, all powerful, everything.
He is the one who makes us know.
And how do we demonstrate that? Because if you say the Bible, then you're saying
you just don't like that.
So here's the thing, Dwayne. We are going to appeal back to God and His Word because that is our ultimate foundation.
How do you know it's God's word? That's
what He made us know. He made us know. He made us.
How did He make you know?
So if you want maybe a historical reason, maybe the proof just a historical reason. Well, the Bible is written over 1400 years. It has 66 books, over 40 different authors with one consistent theme, that is Jesus Christ. So historically it's consistent with itself. So that's just
how is it historically consistent with itself when we can't even verify the authors of the books? There's no way for us to verify this information.
We cannot, if we can't verify the authors in the book, and matter of fact, Bart Ehrman would disagree with you because he said the most certain thing we know historically is that Jesus Christ
walked this earth
and died on the cross.
How do we know this? Where's the historical evidence for Jesus dying on the cross? Can you show me all the historic documents that proclaim to a Jesus dying on a cross?
Yeah,
that rose on the third day and walked on water and turned water into wine.
Let me ask you this,
Dwayne. You're a naturalistic, so of course you're going to reject these things.
Nobody's ever shown me any evidence that anything outside of what is natural exists.
Logic.
So you're saying what is happening outside of nature, and where is this?
Let me ask you this.
Logic.
What logic? Show me the evidence for something happening outside of nature. And what is nature? And how do we define what is outside of nature?
Hold on, Dwayne. You just made the claim that you've never had anybody show you things outside of anything naturalistic.
Nobody's shown me any evidence that something that happens outside of nature exists.
Let me ask you this then. The things that are natural, they're tangible, right? You can grab them, right?
Tangible and natural are not even close to being tangible.
I'm making a distinction.
Okay.
I'm not saying that they're one and the same.
Right.
But that which is natural can be tasted, touched, felt, things like this, right?
No.
Naturalistic.
No.
The things that you can see in front of you.
No, that's not what the definition of natural is.
Can you show something natural that doesn't apply to that?
Yeah, sure. Bacteria.
But you can see that under a microscope.
Can you see it with your naked eye?
No, but that doesn't negate the truth of it actually being physically there.
Right.
Okay. Well, do black holes exist?
It's a theoretical position.
You're saying that we don't know for certain that black holes exist?
Scientists don't know for certain that black holes exist.
Okay. Do they have strong evidence to suggest that they do?
Yeah, but we're not talking about strong evidence. We're talking about a surety.
Well, I mean,
now you mentioned a naturalistic. Hold on, you mentioned a naturalistic position.
I didn't mention a naturalistic position.
You said that you hold to a naturalistic position.
Yeah. When we first
no, I didn't. I said, what is natural? What are you talking about when you say natural?
Aren't you
anything besides natural? So what are you referring to? Isn't everything that we experience happening right here in nature?
No, there's some things outside of.
What will be outside of it?
I'm saying the point is,
I'm saying I don't understand what we're talking about. When you say outside of nature, what are we talking about? What is something that exists outside of nature?
You made the claim that you don't know anything that's outside of nature or
that exists.
Natural.
That's not a claim, for one. So
that is a claim.
I do not currently believe that anything exists outside of nature because I've only ever heard of nature. I've never heard of.
Well, and K-Dub said logic, the laws of logic.
Logic is outside of nature.
Yeah, here's why. It's immaterial, it's unchanging, and it's eternal. Is something that is the laws of logic.
The laws of logic are eternal?
Yeah, meaning they apply at all times, always, without change.
So before anything existed, there was non-existence and existence at the same time.
What is non-existence?
I mean,
I don't understand what these words mean.
I think you would in
is
your average everyday conversation with a person.
I mean,
non-existent,
non-existent.
not
I mean,
existing.
ceasing to exist.
Right. Without existence.
What is something that ceased to exist?
We're asking you if laws of logic ever ceased to exist.
You were non-existent at one point, correct?
I mean, I don't know what it means to be non-existent.
You were not here. You were not here. You didn't exist.
Let me ask you. Do you have kids, Dwayne?
No.
No. You have a particular situation right now where children in your life cease to exist. There's no children that you have, right?
So exist in the dictionary means have objective reality or being. Is that what you guys?
Yes.
So do I have objective reality or being? Like, do I exist?
I guess you would have to say no. Given your definition of being objective, you don't actually know that you're here or not.
I mean, yeah, we could. I guess technically we could be.
So you could be in the Matrix.
Yeah, we could be, man. We could be like software running on the hardware, man. But I think there's good reasons to believe that we exist.
What are they?
The fact that millions of other people are having a similar experience to mine in terms of how we define existence.
Well, how do you know they're not all in the Matrix?
I don't, but the mere fact that they're having the same experience as me, or at least the majority of the same experience, like for instance, some people claim to be abducted by aliens, right?
All this can prove why you're in the Matrix.
So people claim to be abducted by aliens, right?
Yeah.
Right. Now, if everyone on Earth claimed that they had been abducted by aliens at one point, there might be a better reason to believe that, you could get abducted by aliens. But in terms of existing, there's a lot of people that can attest that they're having a similar experience as me, which would attest to, us existing essentially. So I think there's good evidence.
So you have to appeal to others for your own existence.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So how do you determine that what they are saying is even relevant or accurate?
Well, if you and I say, like, for instance, and again, you can be wrong. Like, for instance, there's plenty of instances where a group of people will all think that they saw something that didn't actually happen. So that's something that happens. But if me and you and K-Dub are sitting in the same room and we all see a black bottle on the table, the likelihood that there's actually a black bottle on the table is much higher, considering we're all having that experience.
I wouldn't just say it's much higher. I would say I can absolutely trust my senses to say that I can say for certain that is in front of me. I mean, why? Why? Because the God of this world has given me a new mind, which is why. I mean, I hope that you see. You don't even live. You don't live according to your worldview, and I'll try to demonstrate that. Because when you are about to approach a walkway by the street and there are cars coming, you know for a fact that you should wait before this car comes blazing by before you actually cross. You live with the certainty that if you try to walk in the street while the car's coming at you 50 miles an hour, that it will hit you and will probably kill you.
I can't be certain about that. My aunt was hit by a bus and she.
But that's what I'm saying is that you don't live as if it maybe will hit you and kill you. You live with the absolute knowledge and certainty that it will.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do, because you don't cross.
It's not certainty though. It's that if I wait for the car to cross the street, the likelihood and the easiness of the task is much more favorable. I mean,
No,
I just think
I'm saying what I'm stating is that you don't live that way. Now you espouse one way. You espouse that you don't have certainty.
I don't.
Your actions display otherwise. Your
That's not
actions
true.
show the contradiction. Yes,
That's
it
not
is,
true.
because
If
you stay your butt on the one side of the street.
That's not true. If you try to run and beat the car across the street, then there's a chance that you could outrun the vehicle and make it across the street before the car hits you. Or you could be hit by the car and be severely injured, or you could somehow be hit by the car and not be injured, right? You know, there's examples.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, you know for certain that if you stand in one spot and don't move, and that car is coming right at you, that car will hit you.
Correct.
100%, right?
100%. You are not, there is no way in this world you are uncertain that that car will hit you if you do not move your butt or stay on the other side of the road before crossing. You said
the car doesn't stop.
That's our point. Is that there are things that you're certain of, and the only reason that you're certain is because of God. I'm sorry, say that again.
But the idea that we know that if you stand in front of a moving large object, that you will be hit by the object is it's a lot different than claiming that there's an all-knowing, all everywhere deity that's cares about who I have sex with and wrote a book. I mean, those are just entirely different.
I'm not saying that is a direct correlation, but I'm saying the process.
Where are you going with that? I mean,
well, the fact is
what he's saying is you don't live consistent with the worldview you even profess.
That's right.
Well,
you claim uncertainty, but you live certain of things every day.
I live with I feel
you claim that there is subjective truth, but if I was to come and steal your wallet, you would want objective justice.
Objective justice?
Absolutely.
What is objective justice?
If I was
want somebody prosecuted for that crime,
right?
Well, society agrees that we shouldn't steal.
If society disagreed, you would be objecting to it.
What'd you say?
If all society said it was actually morally right, would you object?
Yes, and if
exactly
for my own well-being, for my own well-being, and if society deemed that it was right, no one would be prosecuted.
And we're not arguing that. What we're saying is what we're espousing is that's contradictory to the statement that it's not objectively wrong.
You guys are saying objectively wrong. I'm still not saying it's objectively wrong.
I'm saying that very reaction that you have makes it.
No, it's not in my best interest. It's not wrong.
So why object to something that's not wrong?
Yeah, if it's not wrong, what's the problem with it?
Eating broccoli is not in my best interest because I don't really like it, but I'm not going to say it's wrong.
Correct.
So stealing is equivalent. That's why I go back to the definition that Dawkins brought up. It's everything is blind, pitiful indifference.
Well, what we do is as a society is we agree on what we think is in the well-being of all of us, and then we try to follow those standards for all of our well-being. And if we choose not to do those things, then we choose not to. I mean, nobody's going to force us.
There we go. So
I don't think it's not complicated. It's really not.
A society has no obligation to live morally.
Does the society have an obligation?
No.
I'm obligated by.
Yeah, from your perspective.
Because the thing is morality is a choice. You make a choice to be moral and you make a choice to be immoral, correct?
Morality is a command. Morality is not a choice. That's why we lock people up for doing it.
Okay, so if I put a gun to your head and he puts a gun to my head and says, I have to put the gun down and I choose not to kill you, am I moral because I was forced not to kill you? Did I make a moral action?
I think what you think I'm saying is that
if he commands me to put the weapon down and forces me and says, if I don't not kill you, then he's going to kill me. And since I don't want to die, I choose not to kill you. Did I make a moral decision?
So I think what you're saying is if we're not forced to do something right, then there is no choice in that. That's not what I'm trying to articulate.
That's not what I'm saying either.
Oh, well, let me express.
I'm saying that being moral has to do with making choices. if you don't choose to do it, or you're doing it out of fear of consequences, or to avoid punishment, then that's not being moral. That's
Not necessarily
being commanded.
No, yeah. I'm not saying the option one way or another makes something moral or not. I'm saying I'm saying that what makes something moral is whether or not God is commanded to do something or not.
I don't know what God commanded, and nobody's given me any evidence.
The Bible.
No.
The law of God is written on your heart. Let me ask you, do you actively steal from people? Do you actively go out and try to murder somebody?
No.
No, you're showing exactly the fact that the Bible is true with that very statement.
No, not because people kill people all the time. Is the law of God not written on that?
Because they are suppressing God's truth at that moment.
Correct.
People suppress God's truth all the time.
What I'm saying is that you end up living out the morality of the Bible without espousing the God of the Bible.
Right. You have to borrow from the Christian worldview.
In many instances, I'm not saying that you are doing so perfectly.
Society's agreed, though, not to do a lot of the things that were happening in the Bible prior to it. It wasn't like
the
Bible society to write.
The Bible says the law of God is written on your heart. You already know about God's law. So whether or not they've read it in the Bible is irrelevant.
How do we arrive that the God of the Bible is the God whose law is written on our heart?
He has revealed it.
Methodology that I can, and how is it falsifiable? How do I determine that?
Here's the thing.
If it is.
None of us on this panel in the world determine what truth is. It is only revealed to us. I mean,
I don't think that truth is revealed to us. I think truth is what we discover.
Everything you've learned has been because someone's revealed it to you.
Has discovered it.
No, revealed it.
No, discovered it.
No, things that are true exist whether or not somebody discovers it or not.
But somebody has to discover it to know it's true.
It had to be revealed to them.
Like, for instance,
because here's the infinite regret.
Did we have to discover germs so that we can create a solution to keep people from dying for not washing their hands? So we know what the truth is about germs, right?
Well, no, the truth about germs existed whether or not we found it or not.
Right.
The fact of the matter is that it was revealed to us.
How when we had to discover it and we had to test and create falsifiable methods to discover germs. That's called the scientific method. Everything that has been discovered
wait.
scientific method is falsifiable.
Wait a minute.
Science discovered germs. Jesus doesn't talk about germs. In fact, he says that you don't need to wash your hands.
Well, besides that assertion, how do you falsify the scientific method using the scientific method?
You said, how do you falsify the scientific method?
Correct.
You're right. You have to use a scientific method. Therefore, you're doing a circular argument.
A method isn't falsifiable. A claim is falsifiable.
Okay.
You made a claim that you have to the scientific method is how we do this. That's a claim.
A method, scientific method is the method we use to falsify something.
Okay.
But that's your claim.
No, it's not a claim. It's the method. The science is not
You're claiming the method.
Are you saying that science is a claim?
I'm saying that's what you're claiming.
No, I'm saying science is a method.
Science isn't a method, it's an observation.
Science is a method. The scientific method.
You don't use science.
It's a methodology.
It's science.
It's a methodology of discovery. That is what science is.
Okay, so when you use the scientific method, how do you falsify it being true or not without using it? Or, matter of fact, I'll ask you a better question. How do you falsify logic without using your logic?
So the scientific method is a method of procedure that has characterized natural science, consisting in systematic observation, measurement, experiment, formulation, testing, and modification of hypotheses.
Observation, like I said. So to the logic question, how do you use your logic? How do you falsify logic without using it?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about logic, we would have to not be using logical fallacies, right? Like, you agree that logical fallacies aren't logical?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, so I feel like anytime we're using anything that is fallacious, that I have learned through logic and reason, that I just toss those arguments out, and that's something that moves us closer to truth already.
So you use your logic to prove logic exists.
You said, do I use logic to prove logic exists?
Yeah.
Logic is a methodology. Logic doesn't exist.
So
it's not a real thing?
It's not a concept you follow?
It's a concept. Concepts aren't things.
Right.
In the sense, the same way that people are.
So logic doesn't actually exist.
Right. So it's like saying you and I exist, right?
I don't know. Before you said you don't know.
I mean, you said we agreed that we exist.
I espouse that we do.
Doesn't exist
you
in the way that we
sure.
exist.
You said you weren't sure. So would you like to change your answer?
We could be in a computer simulation, but the best evidence that we have right now would suggest we exist.
So you're just saying maybe we do.
It's highly probable.
It's highly probable.
Okay.
Highly probable, brother. And so, since we exist, logic doesn't exist in the same way that you and I exist, because logic requires an independent source to use the method. If logic doesn't exist without the people that use the method.
So before anyone existed, there could be logical contradictions.
You said before anyone existed?
Yeah. If everyone was wiped off the face of the world, let's say mass genocide, and could there be a logical contradiction given your answer?
No.
How? There's nothing independent to,
That's what I'm saying. There can't be logic if no one exists.
So that's my point.
To exercise the methodology.
So there could be logical contradictions.
Yeah, because if logic only exists within the brain of a person, within a living being, and it's no longer here, it logically follows.
And I'm saying why we shouldn't say that logic exists.
Logic
is a method that independent sources use to
exists.
What'd you say?
Which does the law of logic exist?
It depends on how you're defining exist. But if you're saying does logic exist as a objective thing? No, it does not exist as an objective.
So fallacious thinking is okay.
Is okay.
Yeah. No, if there's no independent people here to exercise logic, then there's no such thing. It doesn't exist in that way.
No. So I think what he's saying is it okay for us to use illogical arguments and that be completely fine?
So illogic is not logical.
But it doesn't exist.
Logic exists.
It does not exist the way you and I exist.
I agree. It's not a person. I agree.
Yeah.
So that's what I was saying.
But you're rejecting logic at all.
Logic doesn't exist independent of humans. Independent of a consciousness to use the method.
Sure, logic doesn't think, but I'm not arguing that it does.
Okay, so it doesn't exist in that way. That's what I'm arguing.
No.
What was your point in asking that question?
The laws of logic exist whether you
are you saying
well,
is logic the way we determine truth? Like, is that what you're saying?
No, let me do it by way of an example. It is logical to say that rain that falls out of the sky will hit the ground due to gravity and these things, right?
Yes.
If we did not exist, will that still hold true?
Would rain still hit the ground if we didn't exist?
Correct.
If humans didn't.
If humans did not. If there was no consciousness. Because you said it does not exist outside of our consciousness. And that would logically follow that the rules of engagement no longer apply?
Well, if there's no one around to engage them, right? What came first, the chicken or the egg? It's kind of like that thing.
The chicken.
The chicken did.
You know? But, I mean, you understand why people say what came first, the chicken or the egg, philosophically.
Yeah, but I have an answer.
Yeah.
A definitive one.
But do you have an answer for the logic question?
No, I don't, actually.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate you being honest.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Hey, how about this, guys? We've been going for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let's do another one of these at some point.
yeah, I'm down. I appreciate you coming on here, Dwayne. Being civil, and hopefully you feel like we were as well. I affirm your statements earlier where you said, "Hey, this is where it needs to happen." I've already seen where people have been commenting, tagging me on Facebook, saying, "Man, this is how it should be done." And
is there people watching this?
yeah,
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
yeah. So as you stated, when you first introduce yourself, this is how it should be done, and hopefully this can serve as a model of how people can respectfully disagree, be passionate, right? We're all passionate, but I don't feel at one point anyone crossed the line, and that's how it should be done.
I think when we jump back on, we should get certain topics where we actually speak more on my positive beliefs, because atheism isn't really a belief system. So it's like, to consider it a worldview, like if you consider yourself an atheism or an atheist, you don't really have, like, that really doesn't tell you what that person believes.
I would disagree, and maybe we can start.
We could talk about
because
that.
there's people that are atheists that believe in ghosts, right? But I may not believe in ghosts.
So we could talk about is atheism a worldview? And
no, atheism is a worldview.
Okay,
sure.
okay. So yeah, we could talk about some of your positive claims, like as you stated, you wanted to do. So I'm cool with that.
Yeah, man. Pencil it in. Shoot, we still have a group chat open, so just when you guys got some time, let's get to it.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate your time, man.
This was fun, guys. Thank you so much, man. I really do appreciate it, man. And God bless you guys.
Yeah, God bless.
All right, brother. It was good talking with you guys.
All right.
Peace.